The purpose of this video is to discuss the 6 earliest English settlements, the 6 earliest colonies that England set up in North America. We know that eventually it will become the 13 colonies, which is what you see on this screen. But before it's the 13 colonies, it's just land in North America. There are no English settlements. There are Native Americans that live here, but there are no state or colony lines the way that we would know them today. It was just land in North America. The first attempt at settling an English colony in North America is Roanoke Island. And I'd like for you to imagine a tiny little dot at the end of this arrow where we would know as the Outer Banks today. Back then it was just one little tiny little settlement, little town known as Roanoke Island. Today we call Roanoke Island the Lost Colony because of that great big mystery where it disappeared in 1585. The only clue was the word Croatoan written on a tree, presumably, we assume, left behind by the colonists who disappear. We don't know if that means they went to Croatoan Island. We don't know if that means they joined the Croatoan tribe or if they were killed by the Croatoan tribe. All we know is that they left a message, Croatoan. John White is the man you see here in purple. He was the governor or the leader of Roanoke Island. And then he went back to get supplies. And when he came back, he's the one who discovered that they were missing. So Roanoke Island was a failure. It disappeared. It didn't work. But that didn't mean that the English gave up. They tried again with Jamestown. So Roanoke Island disappears, but they try again by setting up another little town, a little settlement, a little dot on this map known as Jamestown. And Jamestown was the first permanent English colony. It was successful. It survived, although it was kind of a nightmare to live there. There was something called the starving times, when a majority of the colonists actually starved to death because of harsh winters and not knowing how to grow crops in this soil or the climate of North America. It was established in 1607, but that winter of 1609 and 1610 was rough. Eventually, it grew and it became successful, and it was proof to the English that it was possible to be successful with a colony in North America. So, what happened is we have our third attempt of Plymouth. Notice how Jamestown and Roanoke Island have a green background. That's because they were established for economic reasons. The purpose of them was to make money. Plymouth has a yellow background because the purpose of Plymouth was different. The purpose of Plymouth Colony was religious reasons. And again, I want you to imagine a tiny little dot, a little settlement at the end of this arrow. It was not the big colony that we know it grows into. It was just a little town. Plymouth was set up so that the people who went there, the separatists, wanted to avoid religious persecution. That's a lot of big words. They wanted to avoid, they did not want, religious persecution. And persecution is when you're treated poorly. Religious persecution is when you're treated poorly for your religion. Back in England, the separatists were not treated well simply because of the religion that they followed. So in 1620, they came across the Atlantic Ocean and tried to set up a religious colony where they could practice freely and nobody would persecute them. Nobody would treat them poorly. It was so successful that 9 years later, in 1629, a different religious group came across the Atlantic to set up Massachusetts Bay Colony. They also wanted to avoid religious persecution. They were also treated poorly because of their religion back in England. So they came to the New World, they came to North America to set up their own little colony where they could freely practice their religion. They were known as Puritans. Remember the little trick that we learned about how Plymouth, if you separate it into 2 words, it's kind of like ply, mouth. And when you ply your mouth open, you separate your lips. So the separatists go to Plymouth. In Massachusetts Bay, a bay is going to have salt water or brackish water. And before you can drink that, you need to purify it. So the Puritans go to Massachusetts Bay. Just a little memory trick to hopefully help you remember that the Separatists go to Plymouth, Plymouth, and the Puritans go to Massachusetts Bay. Our fifth little settlement, our fifth little attempt at establishing colonies in the New World was Pennsylvania. It was not the big colony or state of Pennsylvania that we know today. Again, it was a little tiny dot on this map of North America. Pennsylvania was established by William Penn. That is not a coincidence. William Penn named Pennsylvania after himself. They wanted to practice their religion with no interference. So they weren't persecuted like the Separatists and the Puritans, but they wanted to come here to set up a colony where they could practice with no interference, with no one getting in their way. The religious group that goes to Pennsylvania was the Quakers. And I have put a Quaker Oats image up here as a reminder because Quaker Oats came out of Pennsylvania, and the man on the Quaker Oats packaging isn't William Penn, but it is a Quaker. It's just a typical way that a Quaker would have dressed back then. Our final small colony, our final earliest colony, is the colony of Georgia. And just like Pennsylvania, it's not the big colony or state of Georgia that we know today. It's just a tiny little dot on this map of North America, and eventually it will grow into the colony of Georgia. But when it first started out, it was started by people who were in debtor's prison. Remember, if you are in debt, it means you owe a lot of money. And back then, if you owed so much money that you couldn't pay it back, they would actually put you in prison. And debtor's prison was an awful place to be. They were given a choice. You can either stay in this awful debtor's prison, or you can go across the Atlantic Ocean and risk your life by setting up a colony in Georgia, where you might have some economic freedom. Remember, economic is a word that means money. So Georgia was also set up as an economic or a money colony. They were not allowed to trade with Native Americans or own enslaved Africans at first because it was supposed to be a punishment. Remember, their options were stay in jail or go to Georgia. So Georgia was supposed to be a punishment, but as it grows, those strict rules are taken away. So we have 6 early colonies, 6 little dots on a map of North America. Eventually, 5 of these, all of them but Roanoke, become successful, and as more people move in and as more people grow their families in North America, it grows into the 13 successful colonies that we know.